Today I'm working with the Elegant Pine Snowflake Designer Series paper from Stampin Up. It's such a beautiful winter collection featuring patterns of greenery, holly, and snowflakes made from pine branches in all of these rich shades of blue and green. Looking at this pattern paper covered in spruce, pine, sprigs, and leafy details, I think it's perfect for winter walks and cabin weekends, with or without snow. Of course, this is the other side, which is absolutely gorgeous. So I'm creating a double page layout today with 7 photos from an afternoon skate not far from home. In fact, it was this paper that inspired the photos I chose. If you look at the photo of me, my scarf is this beautiful tealy blue color, and then my coat is that deep navy, kind of like the Secret Sea shade in this collection. So then if I mix a few other patterns like this snowflake paper that pulls in that red from my youngest son's hat, he wore that toque all the time, and I think this is going to tie everything together beautifully. A resource I like to use when I'm looking for inspiration is Pinterest. And let me see if I can show you this on my iPod without too much glare. Nope, not really. But a while ago, I pinned this single page layout from Lacey Robin from Not Just for Boys Kit Club. There, turning off that light helped. And it looks like she used a tree stencil or a stamp in the background and then some ink splatters, not a lot of pattern paper, and a ton of embellishments. That stenciled effect immediately made me think of this paper from the Winter Meadows DSP. If you've been following me for a while, you know how much I've enjoyed using this collection. It was released in last year's annual catalog, and I'm sorry it is no longer available, but if you have a few scraps, pull them out. But how perfect is this, right? I think it's going to be great. I have a vision in my head, and I hope I can translate it onto this layout. So I'm starting with this design as my jumping off point, and I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to do for the second page yet. I thought I would start with the first and kind of see what happens. So let's scooch these papers off to the side here. And I have 2 10 by 10 squares of willow white cardstock that I've previously gutted from the center of another layout. And they've been just sitting there on my desk waiting to be used. And I think they'll work perfectly here. Now I'm planning to center them in this pretty peacock pattern paper for the base of my layout, and then I'll run the tree pattern across both pages to tie the two together for a 12 by 24 contiguous spread. I'll just get this centered in the camera. Now we have long winters here, and whenever the weather is decent, we love to spend time outdoors, and skating is a favorite of our family. Both boys grew up playing hockey, just like my husband James. I'll bring in my photos. This one is 4 by 5.5. You might be thinking, that's a funny choice for a focal photo. But you can see my shadow, so technically it's a picture of all 4 of us. Then I have a selfie, that's 3 by 4, and a few 3 by 3 photos for the right side, and then a 4 by 3 landscape. And there's another 3 by 4 for the left and a 4 by 4 for the right. I'm leaning towards a grid style arrangement for the page, but like I said, we'll see how it progresses. The inspiration layout I'm using has 5 strips of paper running vertically along the page. I'm looking for patterns that will help tie all the colors in my photos together. I already have, the peacock color, and I'm thinking this pattern with the Secret Sea base pairs nicely. Of course, I want to use the pattern paper on the reverse side of this paper too, since most of the center will be covered by the white cardstock base. I'm going to gut the middle section so that I can use this piece for one of my strips. This is a great way to get more mileage from each sheet. And then it has all the colors that I want to bring into the layout. That seems to happen to me often, wanting to use both sides of one pattern paper. I'd like to bring in a snowflake pattern. I think this one will work nicely. And then it's a bit brighter green. I believe it's called Shaded Spruce, but it blends well with the rest of the colors. And then I'm pulling in a pattern paper from the Winter Meadows DSP. It's in the Blueberry Bushel shade, which isn't listed as a coordinating color in the Elegant Pine Snowflakes, but if you look at my photos, Evan's shirt, even my husband and my son's jeans, as well as, the soft tones in the sky, they all fall right into the same color family. So I think it's going to tie in beautifully with everything else on the page. I'll get this cleaned up and we'll get started building the layout. Before I move on, I wanted to show you how I got the center of a piece of paper, just in case you are new to scrapbooking and haven't tried this yet. You'll need a rotary trimmer like this one with a sliding blade and a lift arm. Since my white cardstock piece is 10 by 10 inches, I'm going to position my pattern paper in the trimmer at the 1 1/4 inch mark. That gives me enough room to add adhesive later. Now you want to make sure that your paper is level all the way along the guide, and then lower the blade just past the 1 1/4 inch mark and pull it down, stopping 1 1/4 inches from the bottom of the paper. Lift the arm, rotate the paper, and repeat the same process on all 4 sides, always lining up at the 1 1/4 mark. And this will give you a nice even frame while saving the inner section of the pattern paper for another project. Once all 4 sides are cut, I'll go in with my scissors and snip any corners I might have missed. It's a great way to stretch your paper because, let's face it, this hobby of ours can be a little, expensive. At least I think so. I mean, I love it, and you can't put a price on something that brings you so much joy. But I'll still do my best to make the most of every piece. One more corner to snip. Geez, I didn't do a very good job meeting those up, did I? And there you have it. Now you've got the center section left. I'll prep one for the other side off camera. When I was looking at the layout off camera, the 10 by 10 square just felt too tight for everything I had planned. I wanted to showcase the pattern paper frame, around the edges, still leaving room for my photos, title, and embellishments, similar to the inspiration layout. So I cut new white cardstock bases at 11 by 11, giving me that extra 1 inch to work with. To add a little contrast between the layers, I placed a Secret C cardstock square underneath. I had cut that to 11 1/4 by 11 1/4. I did gut the center of that one too, and this gives me a nice layered look without wasting any of my paper. I want to soften the bottom edge of the tree pattern paper, so I'm going to tear it. This creates more of a snowy, wintry feel. I like to tear the paper towards me to reveal that white edge. Now, if you were to tear it away from you, the white edge ends up on the back instead. I'm being careful here, ripping just a small bit at a time, sliding my fingers down the paper as I go to maintain control. I only want to remove a small strip from the bottom. That looks great. I'll go ahead and tear the other side off camera. I cut 5 3/4 inch strips of pattern paper I thought would complement my photos the best. I'm tucking them behind the tree pattern paper for now. Maybe I should figure out the exact order before I get them all tucked into place. I'm being mindful of which patterns sit next to each other. I don't want similar patterns or colors that clash. For example, I wouldn't personally put the green and the teal patterns right next to each other. I left the strips the full 12 inch for now, except for this one, which was cut from the center portion of the base pages. In the layout I'm following, she dovetailed the ends of the strips, so I'm going to do that too. On smaller strips like this, I just eyeball the center. I snip up from the middle, then I cut each corner towards that point. Once I have the first strip cut, I'll use that as a guide for the rest so that all my cuts will look consistent, hopefully. Before I attach my base pieces together, I'm going to add some glittery splatters in both the Secrecy and Pretty Peacock color. And of course with my secret weapon, the Wink of Stella brush. Let me just get my space prepped so we can do this part together. I've learned the hard way that splatters like to travel a little further than you think. So if you have a splatter box, now is the perfect time to grab it. But I usually use a few scraps of paper to protect my surface, and that works well for me. I'm starting with a large acrylic block, and I'm adding a bit of ink to each end, one color on each side. It never goes on perfectly, and that's totally fine. Now, alternatively, you could use re-inkers for this step, just placing a small drop of each color right onto the block. Keep in mind, you don't need much. I like using an acrylic block for small batches of color because it's quick, easy to clean, and you always have one nearby. But honestly, any smooth, non-porous surface will do. A glass mat, a silicone mat, or even, a clear stamp case works really great too. So now I'm taking the Wink of Stella brush and I'm blending the ink around, adding just a drop of the glittery liquid to mix for extra sparkle. Once that's ready, I'll start tapping the pen. I'm using a bone folder here, but anything will work, like a pen or anything you have on hand. This is going to create those beautiful shimmery splatters across the cardstock. I like to start light and then build up the effect. It's easier to add more than to take it away. I want a few in the upper left corner, and then some in the upper right, and then finally a few down in the lower right to balance that out. Now I'll switch to the other color, but first I want to clean the Stella brush by swiping it onto some scrap paper until it runs clear. Then I'll repeat the process with the Secrecy ink, concentrating on the same areas as before. I think you get the idea here, so I'll pop off camera and finish it up. Since I've already got all this ink and glitter on my block, I don't really want to waste any of it. Using a blending brush, I'm picking up some of the ink and softly brushing it onto the corners of the paper to create, this beautiful halo of color. Then I'll move to the opposite corner and to add balance. I did speed this part up quite a bit in the video. It wasn't part of the original vision I had for this layout, but sometimes that creative process has its own ideas. And, we'll just follow along and see where it leads. And then next, I'm bringing in the Pretty Peacock ink, filling in the remaining edges and applying more concentrated color in some areas while blending out to almost nothing in others. I don't want this to be perfectly symmetrical, just a natural soft finish while using up the rest of this ink. This is the Delicate Pines bundle, so I have the stamps and the dies. I'm focusing on several of the stamps. I've already mounted them onto clear blocks. I have the largest snowflake, the medium one, and then kind of one of the snowflake fill stamps, and this little snowflake last. You can see what they look like more clearly on the package. So the largest one, the medium, and then these ones over here. I'm sticking with the same colors as before, Secrecy and Pretty Peacock. And I'm going to start in the upper left corner, stamping the largest snowflake in second generation to give me a softer look, slightly off the page, and then the medium-sized one just below it, all in second generation. Hopefully that one doesn't get covered up later. Using the same color, I'll stamp the fill image inside the large snowflake to give it a multi-toned look. You want to line up so the dots in the center match, and then the extra branches fall between the others. Lastly, I'll stamp a few of the smaller flakes around to fill in the space, always stamping off first for that lighter color. To keep things moving, I'll finish the rest off camera. While I'm at it, I'll ink the edges of the cardstock and pattern paper with Secret C ink to tie everything together. My layout is mostly adhered at this point. I wanted to show you that I trimmed down all the strips behind the tree pattern paper so that I can use the leftover pieces on the right side of the layout. For the title, the Pinterest version used Winter Wonderland. So, why not do the same? I'm using the Alphabet a la Mode dies for the word winter, which I cut from cherry cobbler cardstock. And then for Wonderland, I used the Snow Day stamp set, stamping the word in Secret C on white cardstock before fussy cutting it out. And just like that, they're in place. I really like that touch of red on the page. Cherry cobbler is one of the coordinating colors, and it pulls in the color from my son's winter hat. I'm resisting the urge to call it a toque, but being Canadian, you know what I mean. It's time to tackle the right side. My first plan was to arrange the photos in a grid like this, but that didn't leave me a lot of room for journaling. I suppose I could have, found a spot somewhere, but I'm switching gears. I'm going to stack the 2 3x4 photos in a column with my journaling block underneath. I like how a column of photos brings balance to a page, and in this case, it helps offset the paper strips on the left. And then I'll nestle the 4x4 and the 3x4 photos beside the column to finish off the grouping. To bring in that blueberry bushel pattern paper, I cut a 3.5 by 12 inch strip to match my column of photos. And then since I'm loving that pop of red, I cut a cherry cobbler mat for my focal photo. And then I cut another piece for the 2 photos on the left, the 4x4 and the 3x4. Tucking that slightly under the blue pattern paper. The inspiration layout used pattern paper to match the focal photo. So I did the same here using the Secret C pattern. It is a busier design, but I kept the border narrow so that it doesn't overwhelm the photo. And I'm repeating that same patterned matting for the two photos on the right to keep the layout balanced. To bring more of those patterns to the right side of the page, I'm using those few leftover strips I had mentioned before from the left, and I'll tuck them behind the photo column here in the corner, and I will dovetail the ends to repeat that look. For my embellishing, the dies in the bundle cut out several of the snowflakes from the pattern paper, the large, medium, and then those small ones, plus a few tiny foliage pieces and pine sprigs. So I went ahead and I cut out several snowflakes in different sizes using some of the pattern papers. I also had a bunch of leftover trees from some Christmas cards I had made earlier. They were created with the Frosted Forest and the Peaceful Evergreens bundles. Both of these are retired sets and are no longer available. But you know what? Any tree dies and stamps from your stash would be perfect here. I'm tucking trees both in front and behind the photos, similar to the inspiration layout, and then layering a few of the snowflakes to complete the clusters. A little about the photos. These were taken on Christmas Eve of 2020, a very different kind of Christmas for all of us. Since it was just the four of us and we couldn't gather with friends or family like we had in the past years, we filled our days with outdoor activities instead. On this day, we spent the afternoon skating at Bear Lake. Normally, there is a large loop cleared for skating, but the wind had created so many snowdrifts that it was challenging to make our way around. For my third cluster on the right, there's quite a bit of open space in my photos, so I'm covering that with a few embellishments. I've got a large kind of partial snowflake that I'll tuck that under the photo and then layer a few trees with that over and under the photo. I typed my journaling in a 3x3 text box in Word and printed it onto white cardstock. I used a dark blue font color instead of black to coordinate better with the page. I tucked a few pine sprigs throughout the layout. I created them using this die. It cuts these beautiful, intricate sprigs, and when you combine them with a few of the other dies in the set, they form a large snowflake. Today, I'm using just the one individually as little accents, and I'll snip the sprigs apart, and then I'm going to tuck them under my clusters to finish them off. I cut this sprig from Shaded Spruce and added a few in Pretty Peacock to tie in more of that color. Finally, to bring in another touch of red, I couldn't resist the Stay Warm stamp set. I wanted to add a little winter toque to the layout. This stamp is designed as a reversing stamp, which means you can use both sides of the photopolymer. On one side, you have the detailed image, but if you flip it over and mount it onto the block with the smooth side facing out, you can use it to stamp the solid background shape. I'm going to ink that side up with cherry cobbler and stamp it, first practicing on some scrap paper. I think I have got like a little air pocket on the stamp. That's why it's not stamping evenly. Let's fix that by pressing it flat to making sure there's no air trapped underneath. Okay, let's ink that up again and try one more time. Much better. I want a bit of variation in color. I'll stamp off twice before stamping onto white cardstock. And then I'll clean the stamp, making sure to get all of the ink off the block too, and then flipping it back to the correct side. This time, I'll press down in the middle first to get rid of any air bubbles, and then I'll stamp the detailed image right over top using full strength cherry cobbler ink. This is such a great way to get that tone on tone look without needing extra layers or dies. And this ties in perfectly with the red accents I've already used across the layout. I'll go ahead and fussy cut that out, but I think it turned out really cute. While I was at it, I stamped and cut a pair of mittens, just the outline in red, and then I stamped a pair of skates in Secret Sea on white cardstock and colored the laces with cherry cobbler Stampin' Blends marker. This skate image is from an older set in my stash. We go skating a lot, so I find myself reaching for it often. And then to repeat the red on the right side, I used a new stamp set called Our Story and chose the sentiment that reads, "This is us." I cut that out with a stitched circle die from my stash, slightly larger than the stamp itself. And I'm going to place that here on the right, overlapping the photo slightly. This stamp reads, "It's the most magical time of the year." And since these photos were taken on December 24th, I think it's the perfect fit for this layout. I'm going to stamp it directly onto the background, which always makes me a little nervous since I've already done all this stamping and ink blending. Now, to help set myself up for success, I'll bring the layout closer to me, and then I'll place a foam mat underneath for, to help ensure a good impression. And then I'll test it out on a scrap piece of paper first. Just checking the placement. Looks good. Okay, deep breath. Let's go for it. I'll ink it up. That looks about in the right spot. Hold it down for a few seconds. And, well, the impression is great. It might not be perfectly straight, but it's not terrible. And I think I can live with that. I wanted to soften the edge of the tree pattern paper, so I used a 1/4-inch strip of white glimmer paper from my stash, tying in with the glittery splatters in the background. To give the clusters a little snowy touch, some of the trees already had that look thanks to some textures paste I had used on them earlier. I'm bringing in a white paint pen. I've already added some highlights to a few of the branches and the title area, but let me show you what I did. I just tucked a piece of paper underneath the sprig, lightly brushing the white pen over the tips, focusing mostly on the ends to mimic snow. Back to the photos. So the wind had created all these snow drifts, but we still made the best of it, carving new paths and racing each other. It was such a beautiful afternoon, clear skies and sunshine, but still cold, about -12 Celsius, which is around 10 Fahrenheit for my American friends. So my son, Evan, never seems to get cold. When you see the rest of us all bundled up in like coats and hats and mitts, it's truly brisk. I've never understood it. He is just hot-blooded, and we keep teasing him that he might be part furnace. For the finishing touches, I used the faceted snowflakes in white, placing them around my clusters to form a visual triangle. Let's bring the iPad back in to take another look at the layout I used for inspiration. I really like that I was able to bring in that tree element for my base pages with the pattern paper instead, but still included some mixed media touches. The glittery splatters, snowflake stamping, and that soft ink blending around the edges of the cardstock. I love that I could mix papers from different collections and have everything still feel cohesive. I did add a touch of sparkle with the Wink of Stella on the snowflakes in the background. If you've been hanging on to some of those winter themed papers in your stash, I hope this inspired you to pull them out and document your favorite outdoor memory too. And if you're looking to add the Elegant Pine Snowflakes collection to your crafty space, just a quick note, at the time of this video, it's currently out of stock, but is expected to return around November 17th. And I've linked that in the description box below. Just click that See More button to find all the details. Thank you for taking the time to join me today. I'd love it if you subscribe to my channel, and if you enjoyed this project, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like a closer look at this layout and more of my projects, you can find still shots over on my Instagram and Pinterest accounts. For more winter-themed scrapbook ideas, check out this playlist right here. Until then, keep telling your stories one page at a time.